Hey, and welcome back to the Playground Talks podcast. I'm Tammy Efriat, your host and the mother of 3 kids, ages 4, 9, and 12. I'm also a certified parenting coach by WCI, which is World Coach Institute, and which is credentialed by the International Coaching Federation. So I started this podcast over a year ago. Unbelievable. The Playground Talks podcast just celebrated 1 year in February 22nd, 23. And so in the first year, we had people talking to us and teaching us and giving some advices. And today we'll start some episode which I'm going to dive into boundaries, which many parents finding challenging. And what do I mean by that? I mean, what does it mean to set boundaries? Does it mean that I need to limit my child, discipline, to control, to put so many rules, to say no? Like, what does it actually mean? And so I dived and made a little research around that. One of the research that I actually used is episode number 6 with Brianna from Conscious Mommy. If you haven't listened to that, highly recommend to go and listen to her. But anyway, today we'll start with the basic of what is boundaries, and we'll dive into one specific boundary. So boundaries, as Brianna taught us, is actually not about limitation and discipline and control. Boundaries is all about connecting and protecting ourselves. And what do I mean by that? So boundary is when you ask yourself or your kids, what do you need and what do you want? When you set those expectations with the people around you, like family member, your kids, your colleague, whoever you can think of, when you set those expectations, this actually make your relationship stronger. When you set those boundaries, you have a healthier relationship. The other thing is that you protect yourself, because when you talk and you set emotional boundaries, intellectual boundaries, material boundaries, physical, sexual boundaries, and time boundaries, you actually protect yourself. So there is actually a great quote that I would love to share with you from the book Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. And the quote goes like this: "A boundary shows me where I end and someone else begins, leading me to a sense of ownership." And I'm going to repeat it. "A boundary shows me where I end and someone else begins, leading me to a sense of ownership." So whenever we talk about boundaries, first of all, is to define for yourself what are your boundaries, what do you want and what do you need. And when we talk about our kids, I highly recommend encourage your kid to do the same. Help them own their own boundaries and understand how they want to be with other people, how they want to communicate with other people, what makes them feel comfortable and safe and what not. So after addressing the basic of boundaries, which is what do you want and what do you need, or what do I want and what do I need, the 6 boundaries that Dr. Downton mentioned in episode 10 is material boundary, time boundary, which we'll dive into today, physical boundary, and sexual boundary. Those two are a bit overlap, and we'll focus on physical boundary just because we talk about kids ages 2 to 8 years old, so sexual boundary are much less relevant. So we'll dive into the physical boundary, emotional boundary, and intellectual boundary. So in the next episode, each episode will focus on one of them. So let's start with time boundaries, which is basically one of my favorite. So time boundary refer to how a person uses their time, which simply saying scheduling, but not only, because setting time boundaries means understanding your priorities and setting aside enough time for the many areas of your life without overcommitting. So I would start with saying, you as a parent, what's your time boundary? How much time do you want to spend with your kids? Have quality time. How much time do you spend working? How much time do you need, just your time? I call it tummy time, but you can call it me time, and you want to work out, talk to your friends, do whatever gives you joy and fill up your batteries. So the first thing that I love to talk about in regard to that is that I love when I have an overwhelmed day and I need those 10 minutes to sit with myself and have a coffee, then I would say to my kids, you know what? I just need the 10 minutes time alone, tummy time. Let's put the timer. And then in 10 minutes, I will be available to play with you, read stories, whatever we'll choose to do. By doing it, by communicating it assertively and effectively, I'm actually modeling for my kids how to set their own time boundary. And just yesterday, I picked up my kid and I was like, hey, Nadav, how was your day? And he was like, Mommy, I need time alone. So I was thinking to myself, okay, he said just very clear his time boundary. And that's not the time for me to keep nagging him. How was his day? What did he eat? Who did he play his? And, all those kind of sort of investigating question. So again, when you do it and communicate it in a very clear and respectful way, your kid is actually allowed, you are allowing your kids to do just the same. Area in our life where we might need to set those boundaries is setting play dates. So a friend of mine just said, hey, are you available like next week? And I was like, yeah, sounds perfect. However, we can have the play date between 4 to 6 because by 6, we typically have our evening routine. So is that okay with you? So pay attention that time boundaries goes to when we meet, for how long we meet. And as long as we set this expectation, then we can either say, yes, it works for us, or no, it doesn't work. Or we can negotiate and say, well, you know what? For us, it's even 5:30 better than 6 because my youngest just is so tired by 6:30. So just to the point of even when we set the boundary, it's still okay to negotiate it. Again, as long as you do it respectfully, also with your kids. My child could come up and say, hey, Mommy, can I have another 5 minutes just to finish up building this train track? And I was like, okay, go ahead and do it. And just know that you might need to have a shorter shower. So again, also with your kids, it's okay for them to learn and to say that doesn't work. Can we do something else and come up with an option? Negotiation skills is so important. I think I might have a whole episode around that. Another thing that came up to my mind is, how you have play date and then your kid comes up and say, I'm bored. I want to go home. And you are having so much fun with your friends. You're not up to leaving. And so another thing about healthy boundaries is that it has to be mutual. The way you want your kids to treat you, it's the way you treat them. So talking about respectful and mutual relationship, you could say, well, give me 5 or 10 more minutes to finish up my discussion with my friend and then we can leave. So let's put the timer. By the way, I love using the timer. And we will have an episode around time management where I'll give some deeper tips around how to use it and implement using a timer. And then the last point I want to mention is warning. It's not only that we come up and say, this is my time boundary, but also once we set the time boundary and we said, let's say now we have 60 minutes to play, it's crucial to come up and say, you've got 15 minutes before it's the end of play time and we're moving towards, evening routine. As much as you are looking at your emails, scrolling Facebook, I don't know, whatever you're doing, and your kids is coming and nagging you to do something and you're really just wanting to finish this email and send it over, it's the same thing with your kids. So be fair with them and give them that warning. And also depends on their age. Sometimes they need more than one prompt. They would need like the 10 minutes prompt, then the 5 minutes prompt, then the 2 minutes where you actually help them move and transition to the next activity. Let's talk about what time violation look like. So first of all, not respecting when the kids wants to be alone. This is, again, mutual. So if your kids say, it's not a good time for me to talk about something, then be respectful to that. Another thing is when someone is demanding too much of your time. And here I do want to say, I know kids have different personalities. Some kids, they need so much attention. they could play with you 2 hours in a row and you wouldn't be even able to go to the restroom. So in those cases, I know for myself that I am setting the expectation and say, you know what, we can have now a 20 minutes of a play, and then I'll need a 5 minutes break to check up, I don't know, my emails. So I'm setting those expectations. Again, it's mutual. If the kid is demanding too much time, I can also come up and say, that's like 30 minutes, then we do 5 minutes break, and then we can go back and play until 6 o'clock. Another type of time boundary violation is when you ask from the kids to do some kind of task, some kind of chore. And let's say he did it really fast, okay? And then you say, okay, he cleaned up the table so fast, then I can also ask him to now load the dishes. So I know that as a child, I was really the type of people pleaser. And I think I fell into this category of a kid that been asked to do something, and then I did it so fast that I've been asked to do another thing, and I would do it. So I'm just pointing that out to say, be fair with your kids. If you ask one thing and they did it, give them the reward will be they have more time to do whatever they want. And if you think that they can do more, the next time set different expectation, but don't take advantage of your kids. I guess that's what I want to say. And then last thing about time boundary violation is when one is showing up late or canceling. And you know what? As parent, and this can happen a lot as parent, that we overcommitted to our boss, to our colleague, to our friend that just really needs to talk to us now. And somehow our own kids just being pushed away and we're not coming and talking to them and have the capacity to listen to them. So this is something that I would highly recommend to just take a moment and think to yourself, how much time can you put your iPhone aside and really be present with your kids and really show up, being in the moment, creating those magical moments, those joyful moments, the one that you want your kids to remember being with you. Yes, so basically, just to wrap it up today, we started talking about boundaries in general. We said that boundaries are not limitation and rule and discipline, but to simply set the expectation around yours and your kids' needs and want. When you do that, the outcome is that you connect and protect yourself. And a question to ask yourself is, how much time do you want to spend with your kids? What's your time boundary? Taking time for yourself, being with your spouse, working out. How do you want to set the schedule for the week? If you need some support to have some clarity around that, I would love to be there for you and listen and make it even more actionable. So in the show note, you can find a link where you can ask a question, and you can also find the link to book a free 30-minute session with me where we can just start and dive into what is it that you want and to have the clarity around. So thank you so much for joining me for this episode. And as usual, treat yourself and your kids with compassion and curiosity. Bye.